Hello, I am Michael. I am an improv artist, wannabe actor, uh, investor, traveler, everything above. And as always, I am very, very neurotic. Most importantly, though, I'm a TV host, and I'm your host for what we call the Second Scene Podcast. It is a Dweebs global production where you can get free mentorship help around the world. They have it in every language. They have people everywhere to help you, anything from resume writing to mental health. So please go to dweebsglobal.org. So today I'm here with Roger Williams. Roger spent 30 years in the youth development teaching fields, and after 2 heart attacks and a year in quarantine, he decided to change his life. He is now his own head crosser offer of one's bucket list. He dedicates almost all his time to fulfilling his life's wildest dreams and sharing them with others through his podcast and other ways and forming a community around the world. So thanks for being here. Welcome, Roger.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I'm excited to have this conversation and share with you and everybody else that listens to your show.
Everything kind of changed for you when you had you had 2 heart attacks, correct?
Yeah, it was the first heart attack that really set everything in motion. The second one came about 8 months later, but it definitely was a push to change things.
I can't imagine how scary that must have been, having a heart attack.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny because the doctors and the nurses, no one calls them heart attacks anymore. It's a cardiac event, right? Because if you say heart attack, people freak out. Everybody thinks you clutch your chest and you fall over and you pass out. And it wasn't quite like that, but it was still pretty scary. And it definitely motivated me to think differently about my life.
Yeah. I look at a lot of stats and they call so many different things cardiac events, though, which makes when you're looking at statistics on chances of having a cardiac arrest kind of scary to begin with.
Exactly.
So is someone not having one? I kind of wish they separated it out so I would know if it was like a...
Well, yeah, and in the midst of it, I'm like, I'm not keeling over. I'm not grasping my chest. Yeah, my back hurts really bad. And, I mean, it was painful and, but it wasn't like, so it took me about 3 or 4 hours to actually call an ambulance. my partner was like, can we please call the ambulance now? Can we please call the It's like, well, I'm not passed out. It's not that big of a deal. But
did your partner figure out what was going on? Like, how would you even know you were having...
No, she just knew that I wasn't well. Like, I took the dog for a walk and and it was in the midst of the pandemic and I hadn't walked outside for a while. And so it was colder than it normally would be. So I was just thinking that my chest hurt because it was cold. Like I was breathing in cold air. So I'm like, I'll get home. And I got in the shower and stood there for long enough for the water to get cold. Nothing changed. And then I had her rub my back and nothing changed. And so it was just like, eventually it's like, okay, well, it's not changing. So you got to do something. So eventually I'm like, okay, and that old, male masculine machismo, like, I'm not going to go see it. I'm fine. Yeah. No big deal. And
sleep it off.
Yeah. I've had this before, probably. It's no big deal. So, eventually took me and woke up a couple hours, a day later, and it's like, so this is what's going on. They put a stent in and all sorts of stuff. So it was an interesting time.
Wow. So it was like immediate surgery.
Yes. Yeah. They needed to open up my arteries to make sure that the blood was flowing.
Wow. And then how did the second one come? Was
a whole bunch of stress.
Really?
Yeah, a whole bunch of stress.
Was it stress about having the first heart attack?
No, I had gone after the first heart attack. I was like, okay, well, first thing I asked was, because I had plans to walk the Camino de Santiago that summer, and I was like, can I still walk the Camino? And the doctor's like, as long as you take your meds and you build up your cardio, you'll be fine. And so it was after that, when I got home from that, doing that little adventure, that I started looking at myself and what was going on around me, and decided I'd quit my job and take a year off, take an adult gap year. And it was just a really stressful time because of finances, and my boss at the time was not being very supportive and didn't understand why I was just, he said, what do I tell my boss about where you're doing and what you're going? And I'm like, I don't care. It just doesn't matter to me. You tell him whatever you want. But because for him, it was just like we had several people leave, which was a part of it too. And so it was just, it was just awkward and stressful. And I gave my 2 weeks notice, and like 5 days later, that's when it kind of kicked in. I had another event. Yeah.
So it
So
was after you gave the notice. Was it the stress of the next
yeah,
part of your life
yeah.
approaching and not having an income, or?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I had to raid my retirement fund and do a bunch of different things, and just all that was stressful. And just thinking about not having a job, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? And how do you explain that to people? And it's not typical life direction that you wind up taking. It's definitely the road less traveled, and so it was just stressful. And they were making a lot of changes at work and wanted me to help with some of the changes, and a lot of them I didn't agree with, and they were using my departure as a reason to move in different directions. And so it was just really stressful dealing with children. High school students is what I did. And
Right.
so for me, it was almost like somebody's trying to hold me hostage. Like, if you don't leave, we won't make these changes. And it's like, well, I gotta leave, but I still cared about the kids and what was going on with them. And so it was just really stressful.
Oh, that's terrible. So they're almost like holding the kids hostage
Sure.
over you not leaving. Oh,
Yeah.
that's terrible. It's amazing how much stress can contribute to cardiac health issues.
Oh, yes. I mean,
It's
I have a lot of family history, which was part of it. I had a lot of not living or living an adventurous lifestyle, and not being the best with my body, taking care of my body, and then the stress on top of it. It was just too much.
got you. You look like a healthy individual.
I'm
What-
trying. Yeah,
Well, a lot's changed for you since then. Did you
yeah.
have a? Do you think you had a less healthy appearance if I had interviewed you years ago?
Probably 2-3 years ago, I probably weighed uh, 10, 20 more pounds than I do now, but and that's a major factor. But just being happier and less stressful, it just makes you feel like you look better. But I've heard of people that run marathons that fall over and have heart attacks, so you just don't know.
Right. No, it can happen at any moment, unfortunately. Try to take as best care we can in our
Yeah,
older years, but in our younger years, we think we're invincible, and
that's
that's
right.
when we cause a lot of the damage. Uh,
Yes, for sure.
yes, I definitely look back on some of the fun times I have, and I wonder if they were worth the fun or not.
You'll never know, but experiences are experiences, and they're always good. You just gotta learn to understand that everything you do has consequences and reactions to what you do, and if you're willing to accept those, then okay. But just know that something's coming. You don't know what it is.
Right. Well, it doesn't sound like you were prepared to retire at the time, but
Oh
now somehow you figured out a way to do it. So, what's the big secret there?
no. Well, I don't know if I'm necessarily retired. I work really hard.
Okay.
Like you said, I do a lot of this, and I'm in the process of looking at starting my own podcast network and taking on 2 more shows of my own, producing for another person. So I've definitely just taken a turn from where I was. I'd done 30 years of youth development teaching experience, and then just decided I didn't want to live that life anymore. So often in service industries, whether it's a police officer or a nurse or teachers, that we are asked by society to get our validation and our praise for just doing the work. Right? It doesn't matter how much we get paid, or we should be compensated by the fact of knowing that what we do is rewarding. And so
Mhm.
I was done with that. I mean, it was rewarding, it was good, but it was also really hard work. And I just wanted to be able to say to myself that I get to choose where and to whom I sell my labor. And I'm not going to let that piece of my life define me, but I'm going to actually make that the catalyst for being able to do other things, not necessarily who I am and finding my self-worth in my job, but finding it in how I live my life.
Got you. But how are you moving on now and not bringing the stress of the finances and everything else along with you? I'm asking you because I want the
Yeah,
audience to know, and then for
sure.
personal.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's just a choice. I live small, right? I've been for the last 10 years since my divorce, really trying to live small, not have a lot of stuff. I don't have a car. I don't have, so I'm not paying insurance, and I'm not putting gas in it. And, I take public transportation, and, I mean, it's reordering your life in such a way that those things that drive us to that get incorporated in everything we do are just minimized. And so I try to do that as much as possible. And I think the way I approach a bucket list is a lot different than most people. Where,
Mhm.
yes, I've done some some pretty outstanding travel and gone to some places and seen some things and met some people. But really, for me, the bucket list is about you know finding that why for your bucket list and letting that dictate the things you do instead of letting social pressure or social media say, oh, I've got to, everyone's riding in hot air balloons in Cappadocia, Turkey, so I need to put that on my list. I don't. It's not something that excites me, or I have a great reason to do that. So I'm not going to put that on the list just because everybody else is. My
Right, but
bucket.
what a change in mindset to go from worried about what people are going to think that you've quit your job to really not caring at all what people think. Or I'm
Yeah,
sure that's impossible. I think it's impossible not to care at
sure.
all unless maybe you're a monk somewhere. But to go from the mentality of really worried about what people are going to think that you
Yeah.
left the job to now doing what you're doing, um, living the way you're living. I live in a constant like keeping up with the Joneses type of
Yep.
situation. I always feel like, and it drives me crazy. But it's so implanted in my head that
And for
like if I have,
Yeah, no, and I get it. And that was one of the reasons I wound up writing the book, was because I think I had found this piece of a bucket list lifestyle that wasn't out there. That I really said, I need to set an intention for this list. So, what is my intention? Why do I have this bucket list? It's not just because one day I'm going to die and I don't want to have any regrets. Well, I'm dead. I'm not going to be able to have regrets about it, once I'm gone. So
right.
what's the why behind this list? And setting that intention really focused my ability to look at my list and go, okay, well, why is this on my list? Why is this not on my list? And being able to pick things to say, okay, well, I'm going to go do this because it matches my intention. And then when you have the list created in that fashion, then I can say, okay, how am I going to cross these things off in a way that matches my intention? So I have this driving force. Like if you started a business without a vision statement or a mission statement, you'd be wandering around just doing stuff. You wouldn't, it would be very hard to be focused and creating a business that mattered and was intentional. And so
Mhm.
that's where I said, okay, for me, my bucket list is about community. So anything that's on my list, for the most part, I mean, there might be a few things that are selfish, but for the most part, there are things that built. Either I'm building new community with people I don't know yet, or I am engaged in community just because it's a communal event, like going to a festival or doing something like that. Or I'm intentionally saying, okay, what is community that I already have that I have to maintain and build up and make better? And so that's really what drives my bucket list. And it could be anything, right? For some other people, it could be, I live an insular life and I want to get outside of my bubble. So the things
Mhm.
I do, I want to experience more culture. I want to experience those things. For some people, their bucket list might be surrounding um, relationships and saying, okay, I'm going to go heal these relationships. I'm going to have these 10 people that I need to go and reconnect with and make some amends or just continue on. It could be focused on um, travel, right? That this is I've lived in the same spot. I need to go experience things. I'm going to travel. So, what is the intention behind it? What are you getting? Why is the why of what you want to do things that really sets the way I talk about bucket list apart from most of the other people that I've seen?
Gotcha. Yeah, you're making me feel like my life is a loose kite right now. Like I don't like I
And that's
don't have
okay.
a yeah,
And,
it's not, I don't know if it is. I have the highest blood pressure I've ever had. I'm
yeah,
more
yeah.
stressed than I've ever been. It's
Yeah, and so we tend to have that why centered around what we do, right? Our job, our job. That the why for our life is centered around. I'm a salesman. I'm a computer programmer. That's who I am, and I just decided I didn't want that's I wanted to define myself. That's why I call myself the head crosser offer of my bucket list. That's my title. Like after the first heart attack and going through this process of thinking about it, that's the first thing I did. I went to all my social media accounts and said, I am now the head crosser off from my bucket list, and that's my job, right? And no, I didn't get a lot of reaction from it, but I wanted to be able to, when people said, when we get together with people and people ask us, the first question they ask us is, "What do you do?" right? I mean, typically when
Mhm.
somebody new, it's what do you do? And I didn't want to say I work with teenagers, although that's great and I was very successful at it and I enjoyed it. I wanted to be able to say I crossed things off my bucket list, or I'm an adventurer, or whatever. I didn't want to talk about that stuff. I want to talk about me, the things I do, and what's valuable and important to me.
Sure. So are you do you do this with your partner? Is this something you two are exploring together, or how do you include her, or how do you?
Yeah, it's we each have our own bucket lists that are ours,
Mhm.
and they each have their own intention of why we have them. But then we have one together that's our bucket list. So the example would be kind of like the Camino de Santiago. That was something that I had wanted to do well before I knew her, probably for like at least 5 or 6 years. Was in my head of like, I'm going to go do this. I want to do this. And so when it came to the middle of the pandemic, and I'm just like, well, it all centers around 2020 being my 50th birthday, and I was going to celebrate the whole year, and I had all these things I was going to go do, and the Camino was one of those. Well, that didn't happen,
Right.
for obvious reasons. So in that kind of, I started getting depressed. I'm like, oh, I'm not celebrating my birthday. I'm not, and I was going to do all these things, and I'm just like, I'm going to go next year, 2021. I'm going, whether or not I'm just going to go. And if
Mhm.
the world is still shut down, then I'll put my ticket. I'll just postpone my ticket. But I'm going to, at some point, I'm committed to taking this trip. And I went to her and said, I really want to go do the Camino, and I kind of want to do it alone. I want that experience for myself. And because the bottom line is that the only person responsible for our joy is ourselves. Nobody else can. I mean, we can have relationships and they can bring us joy, but I'm responsible for even having those relationships, right? I'm the one that's responsible for building those, maintaining those, whether it's my kids, my partner, my family, whatever it is. This is my responsibility. And so I went to her and said, I'm going to go do this. And it was also it was her 49th birthday. Her birthday kind of fell at the time that I was. Yeah, it was her 50th birthday, and I was kind of in 2021, and it was kind of like she was like, "Well, you're going to be gone for my birthday." She was kind of upset, and I was like, "Well, what do you want to do for your birthday?" And she goes, "Well, I'd like to go to Spain and just travel around." So she left the States like a week and a half, 2 weeks after I left, and she went to Barcelona, she went to Seville, she went to Madrid. She did this whole trip of her own solo traveling while I was walking across Spain. And then the last week of her trip coincided with the last week of my trip. And so she came to Sarria, Spain, and met me there while I was walking. And we walked the last 5 days together. So when we walked into Santiago de
Oh wow.
Compostela, we were together. And so it was really nice. I was so proud of us because it was like she went off and did her thing. I went off and did my thing. And then we did something together, which I think is, for me, is a really healthy relationship, and I love being a part of that duo that we can do things on our own, but then we can do things together. So there are things when we talk through it. We went. She's like, "Well, I want to go. I want to go to Mexico and spend a week in Mexico." I'm like, "Well, if I." The only thing on my list in Mexico is Mexico City to go see a lucha libre match at Arena Mexical. Like that's on my. I'll go do that. And
Sounds
as
great.
long as I can do that, if there's anything else you want to do, that's fine. I'll go do it with you. For me, a lot of it, like even during lockdown, for me, it was like I had to find something to look forward to, right? I mean, we're just sitting around every morning, getting up. My commute went from an hour and 45 minutes to 5 minutes, so I didn't have all that time to process everything in the world or process my job before I got there. So everything was so immediate. I think my pressure was, my blood pressure and everything was so much higher because I, it was just, intense. It was very intense
Mhm.
not being able to leave the house and
Yeah.
always watching the news and doing all that stuff, that when I finally said, no, I'm not going to live this way, where the way I'm going to live is I'm going to look forward to things. Right. And just because you have a bucket list doesn't mean you have to rush everything and get everything done in a year, like I was trying to do for my 50th birthday. It's like, I have some things that are kind of out there, and I'm slowly saving money to make those things happen and get them done. And my whole being is so much happier knowing that yes, I'm going to do those things. Yes, I'm going to fulfill that. And it's something to look forward to, right? So many people during lockdown were just like, I didn't have anything to look forward to. Didn't know where the world was going. And I think in general that if we can make that list and decide, okay, it's not a New Year's resolution, right? New Year's resolutions fail, miserably. It's like
Mm-hmm.
9 to 12% of New Year's resolutions actually make it, and most people don't get past February. It's like only 26% of people get past February with their New Year's resolution. But for
That
me,
sounds about right. Yes.
yeah, yeah. You're not going to argue the statistics, but you can look them up. but it's like, for me, it's like I have this list, and I'm constantly looking at that list, going, okay, what's next? What do I want to do? What do I not want to do? And it should be fluid, so there's not shame if I don't do something, right? For me, a bucket list should be a living document, not a 10 commandments written in stone. You have to do these things. I think that's another thing, a misconception people have is, and that would put pressure and all that kind of stuff. But for me,
Right.
I can put things on my list. I can add things. I can do the things on my list and cross them off. But I also erase things off my list too, and say I'm not going to do this. Or Burning Man had been in my head as something that I would put on my bucket list for years and years and years. But as I talk to people about it, and it's like, I don't want to spend 8 days with dust in every crack of my body. It's like I'm 52 years old. I mean, I know people who do it that are older than me, and that's great for them. But it's like I'm not sure that's something I want to do anymore. So it's
Right.
currently off my list. I took it off. There's no shame in that. Life just changes and it's different, and it's okay to take that list and look at it and say, okay, I'm not into these things anymore, but what else am I into? And what else will hit the intention of the list? And so I don't feel the pressure of getting things done, right? Because then it just becomes a to-do list and it's keeping up with the Joneses. But every year I can go back and look at that list and say, okay, what's important, what's valuable, and what do I want to accomplish this year and put as a priority this year. I get stoked for doing those things. I'm working on plans to go to the World Championship of Barbecue in Memphis, Tennessee, with two of my buddies from junior high, and we're just gonna have a guys' weekend. And it's gonna be, we tried to do it 4 or 5 years ago and it didn't work out. I'm like, let's make it happen this year, and they're like, all right, let's do it. And so I'm stoked for that. I'm so looking forward to having that time and being with them and experiencing that experience, and I get to look forward to that. And so to me, there's a lot less pressure, a lot less anxiety about that, and if that doesn't happen, great. I mean, we'll figure it out. We'll push it down the road. We'll do it next year. It's not like there's any have tos. There's want tos. I think
Right. That's great. It's a list that you're not disappointed if you didn't get to do every single item on it. And it sounds like it's fluid, where it's not even like there's a priority for one. It's kind of what's going to work.
Yep.
What's going to work for this year? What's going to work for the near future? What's going to work for the next one?
Yeah.
I noticed you have tattoos on your knuckles. Was that part of your?
It was. They're not even a year old yet, but it was. It's something that I had on my list forever. I've been tattooing my arms for about 27 years, and knuckles are a big deal because they hurt really badly, and secondly, it's about you can't hide them unless you're wearing gloves, which is very infrequent. We don't live in a society where everyone wears gloves anymore. It's not 1865, so
Right.
you can't hide them. You can't button your shirt, roll your sleeves down and hide them. So it was a kind of a big deal for me. It's something I always wanted to do, and I'd spent a lot of time trying to decide what to put on them because I want.
Right. That's the hardest part.
Yeah. So I'd figured out, because you only have 8 letters for one, so you got to fit whatever you're doing at 8 letters.
Limits it down to your options there, which is actually kind of good.
Yeah. So we, for me, it was just I figured that out when I'd come up with the right phrase and the right wording a couple of years ago. And I was no longer in my job, didn't have that pressure of saying, oh, geez, if you do this, what's going to happen? What are kids going to think about that? What's the principal of the school you're going to think about that? Those kind of things. And I was just like, I'm okay. I'm going to do it. And so, yeah, about last January, I think I got them done.
Okay. What does it say?
It says, do no harm.
I like that.
Yeah. So it's kind of
Perfect.
it's I like to say it's 80% namaste and 20% fu.
Perfect.
It's a good balance.
Perfect. Perfect. I want to do my arm. I have a couple random tattoos, and
Uh-huh.
I guess on my bucket list, I want to get a sleeve, but I can't figure out what to do, so it keeps getting put off.
So I have two sleeves. My left arm is like all mine. Like
Hmm.
it's like all the different stuff that I want. I call it my nerd arm because I got a lot of comic book and Star Wars references and Game of Thrones
Nice.
tattoos and all that stuff. And then on the other side, that's the Quetzalcoatl from Mexican culture, and
Okay.
the Mayan calendar all on that arm. And the interesting thing about when I bring that up is that I found an artist online that I liked their art, and
Hmm.
I just went in for our consultation. He goes, "What do you want?" And I said, "Whatever you want to do."
Interesting.
Yeah,
And you just let him go.
yeah. And so he drew everything up, and he's like, "Is this okay?" I'm like, "Yep," because it's your art. So,
Perfect. I'm
yeah,
guessing you did a lot of research on what it means now and all the.
he walked me through it while we were. It was about 27 hours of sessions
Oh,
to
that's
do it all. So we got to know each other. We built a relationship. We're still in communication and talk and
oh,
stuff.
that's nice.
So
Oh,
yeah,
that's nice. It's beautiful. Yeah, I've seen. God, I'm looking at arm tattoos all the time online, and I'm like, there's a couple I just want to copy, but then you're like, you can't copy someone, but maybe I
yeah.
could get an artist to interpret it
Or
into their.
yeah, or just tell them here's the theme or here's whatever, and you come up with the art. I mean, because they are artists. Most
Right.
some of them, some of them are hacks, but most of them are artists. and and so why not have a piece of their art?
Yeah.
Say I'm into
I
these things. Draw something up.
I got one of my tattoos in New Orleans 20 years ago in a
Nice.
motel. So
That's
I went authentic, I guess.
yeah. Well, better than saying you got it in jail. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
good.
true. My goals or even intentions or the things I'm doing, like they're just all over the place. And
Yeah.
it's nice that you have such a focus
And
while still keeping things broad. I mean, you still, people seeing it from the outside might be like, where the hell's his focus? But you
yeah.
have a focus.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I had an opportunity show up last week. Someone said, "Hey, why don't you do this?" And I'm like, would that bring me joy? Would that be more work? It's like they wanted me to do a TV show, and I was just like, based on my podcast, and I was just like, huh. And it was for like a small, Roku channel type thing. It wasn't like
Hmm.
one of the networks. That would be a different conversation. But I'm just like, oh my gosh, I've already kind of moving down this road where I'm going to be doing a couple of other podcasts and um, probably producing one for someone. And I was just like, that doesn't fit. Right. I mean, it's probably a great opportunity and it's probably going to do well. And I'm an Aquarius. So when you dangle shiny things in front of me, I'm gone. I'm just like, that's where my attention is. So I know that about myself. And I'm just like, okay, I've got to put in the work, right? It's been so easy for me in the past just to be like, oh, I've got this idea, I'll go do that. I've got this idea, I'll go do that. And when I started the podcast, I was like really firm with myself to say, okay, you at least have to do a straight year drops, straight year of, interviews, and then see what happens, right? So, there's so much what they call pod fade in our industry where people start a podcast and 2 months later they're gone.
Oh, yeah.
They
Oh,
stop
yeah.
they stop doing it. And I didn't want to be that person. I wanted to at least have a body of work, to say this is what I did at least for a whole year,
Right.
and just kept myself to that. It actually wound up on my bucket list. Drop 52 episodes in a week without not having any interruptions, and I wanted to cross that off. And so I was able to do that, and I'm so glad that I did because now the show's doing well. I enjoy it immensely. I love doing it, and people are responding in a way that they're getting something out of it. It's like, what else? I'm not making a lot of money, but at least those three things are happening, and if those three things are happening now. If I keep doing it, a year from now, 2 years from now, who knows what'll happen? And
Right.
so I want to just be more stick to itive than I have been in the past. And I think
That's
it helps me. It helps me keep my focus. So I had to tell that person, no thanks. I think I'm going to pass on this bright, shiny object that's in front of me, although I'm sure it's wonderful.
That is very hard to do. It is very hard to say no to things.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I have a very difficult time doing that, but thank God I didn't say no to this podcast, because I like you. I'm sure you like me, where we just love talking to people. So
yeah,
it's just,
exactly.
Yeah.
And I love story, and I love, because my podcast, I interview people just like you do, but it's very specific. So they've crossed an item off their list, and we just talk about that item for half an hour, okay. and then we talk a little maybe about something else they want to do, like in the future. But we just sit there and talk about this item that they've crossed off. Why did they want to cross it off? Where did that come from? What was it like doing it? How did you accomplish that? And how did you feel after you were done? Right? And it's just one item. And I just love being able to tell other people's stories.
You're easy to talk to, and like you said, you're very you just don't, very unjudgmental person. You can feel that immediately when you're talking to you. That's a great quality.
There's probably some people in my life that wouldn't agree with you, but but I think it's so important, right? I mean, to me, like, having a bucket list, it's important and it's valuable, but it's like, I'm not going to tell you, like, if you don't have one, you're wasting your life, right? I mean, like, that would be a judgmental statement. And so for me, it's more of what I would like for people to grow into, is to accept whatever the universe gives them and be more open to that. Just like you said, it's hard to be open to whatever. So example I would give is, I went to Europe this year for about 6 weeks. No, about 12 weeks. I went to Europe for about 12 weeks, and my father passed away in the midst of that trip. And no, thanks. We were all good. We were definitely all good. We had definitely had problems, but the last 20 years were super awesome. And he was one of my best friends. So I'm very, very lucky. I understand how lucky I am. But he passed away, and I was in Trieste, Italy, right? And I'm on the phone with my partner, and I'm like, "Can you bring my blue blazer?" And she goes, "You can't wear that Elvis thing to your dad's funeral. It's like this rock and roll blue sparkly blazer. She's like, you can't wear that with jeans at your dad's funeral." I'm like, "Well, what am I supposed to do? I'm in Trieste, Italy." She goes, "Well, just try, just go and see." So I opened up the Google machine and typed in tailored suits, and for me, I'm like, I want to buy local. I don't want to just buy something somewhere off the rack. And so I found this little tailor, went to his shop, and his name was Fabrizio. And I walked into his shop, and very small, out of the way, and his fiance was there, and she says, "How can we help you?" And I was like, "I need a suit for my dad's funeral." She's like, "When is it?" And I said, "Well, I got to leave for it in about 4 days." And she was like, "Ooh, oh no, my fiance will be here in a couple minutes. He'll help you." He rides up on his Vespa, literally rides up on his Vespa, and comes in a totally beautiful suit. So I knew his work was good, but he walked in. "How can I help you?" And he's like, "I don't know." Pulled something off the rack, said, "Try this." And I had it on. I'm looking in the mirror, and I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm in a handmade, fine Italian crafted suit," and I'm like, this is gonna be so expensive. And then I just looked at it, and I'm like, you know what? I don't care. This is my dad's funeral, and I'm gonna look good. I'm gonna feel good. I got back to my place, and I told my partner, I said, "I just put $500 in your account. You just go get a dress. Go make yourself feel good. We're gonna feel good when we go." And I just said, whatever it takes, I'm gonna get this. And I wasn't expecting that at all, right? I wasn't expecting to find something that worked, because Fabrizio was like, "Oh, I can take in the legs. I can do that within the next 3 days, and I'll get you a pocket square and that matches." And he was just super wonderful guy, just absolutely amazing. Which we are also still friends now. And so
you pick up a lot of friends on your
but again,
as you go along.
But again, that's my intention, right? I mean, if I'm is to build community, so I try to make that happen. And so so it was like, I never expected to own a fine Italian handcrafted suit, but it's just like, it just happened, and I was open to that experience. Not on my bucket list, right? But being out in the world, to being able to say, okay, whatever comes to me. And my partner said, "Well, how much was it?" And I said, "Well, it was a little more in Men's Warehouse, but certainly not in Armani," right? So it was so it was fine. I was shocked at how affordable it was, and I was just like, "Yeah, let's do it, let's go." And so I think setting myself up to be in a place where I allow the universe to say, okay, whatever comes, whatever it sends me, I'm going to at least evaluate it. I'm at least going to give it a chance. And I think the bucket list is kind of a building block to get you to that point in life. And understand that a lot of people can't just jump from the daily grind to letting the universe kind of make them flow. And so for me, the bucket list is this tool that you can use to kind of get there. And that's my hope for people.
Got you. Well, thank you for sharing. What are a couple things that are on your bucket list that you're looking forward to doing in the near future?
Oh, I told you about going to Memphis with my buddies. That's important to me. I have been teaching myself how to play the ukulele. I used to play guitar, but I'm teaching myself how to play ukulele. And eventually I want to get to the point where I feel comfortable enough filming myself and putting it on TikTok, because I'm teaching myself like 70s rock songs. So it's a little different. So I'm excited about that.
And congrats for having such a successful podcast. It is crossingitoffpodcast.com. So that's crossingitoffpodcast.com. We will post links to it below the video and all the everywhere we're playing this. We'll put links to it for you.
Great.
So thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh, Michael, it's a pleasure.
Well, everyone out there, again, this is a Dweebs Global production, dweebsglobal.org. Sorry, this is dweebsglobal.org. That's why we do this podcast. They give free mentorship help for everyone around the world, every language, anything from mental health to resume writing. It is dweebsglobal.org. So see y'all next week.